بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So as we've been discussing in the previous nights, that good manners is an essential ingredient. It's a very, very important ingredient to look for when you are choosing a sahib, choosing a friend, choosing a companion. Not just that, good manners is something therefore that a person should give importance to concerning himself. That not just when I'm looking for a friend, this is the criteria that I need to look out for, but first and foremost myself. A person should look at himself. Do I have the characteristics? Do I meet and fit that criteria concerning a good friend, of being a well-mannered, good-mannered person? Because if not, if I am not a good-mannered person, if I'm not a well-mannered person, and being well-mannered is a criteria from the 5 criteria of being a good friend, if I'm not a well-mannered person, then why should you give me your time? Why should you give me your companionship? Why should you be my friend if it's the case that I am a ill-mannered person? And then we mentioned that good manners, it springs from 4 hadith. Good manners, it branches forth from 4 ahadith. Good akhlaq, they are based upon 4 ahadith. The first hadith and the second hadith we discussed the other night, the hadith of Anas, من كان يؤمن or rather لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And then the other night we discussed the second hadith, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him say a word of good, let him speak that which is better, let him say that which is best, or keep silent. So now what remains are the other 2 hadith. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. From the perfection of a person's Islam is that he leaves what doesn't concern him. And likewise the 4th hadith, that when the man came to the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam and he said, advise me, the Messenger said, لا تغضب, don't be angry. The man kept on saying, advise me, and the Messenger said, don't get angry. So we'll briefly reflect upon these 2 narrations. As for the first one, then that is the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, recorded by Imam at-Tirmidhi, min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. From the perfection of a person's Islam is that he leaves what doesn't concern him. We mentioned before that Islam is of levels. People's Islam is at levels. People's Iman is at different levels. And likewise, one person, his Iman, it fluctuates. It goes up and it goes down. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that even within 1 hour, a person's Iman can fluctuate, go up and down. At one part of the hour, he has a nafs that is mutma'inna, a nafs that is tranquil, a soul that is tranquil, at peace, a righteous soul. And then in that very same hour, the person's soul, it can change, just like a canoe boat capsizes. Your soul can change, and it can become a soul that is ammara bisu, a soul that is commanding with evil. So Iman, it goes up and down. Your Islam, it can go up and down. Islam is at different levels. And the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. From the perfection of a person's Islam is that he leaves what doesn't concern him. Meaning that there is a level of perfection of Islam. You have the entry point, the shahadatan, the 2 testifications of faith. Then there is a perfection of Islam. There is a perfection that is wajib for a Muslim. If he doesn't reach that level, if he's not on that level, then we say that his Iman is naqis, his Islam is deficient. He's Muslim, but it's deficient. What are the factors that make a person's Islam weak and deficient? By not doing the obligations and by doing the prohibitions. By doing that which is haram and by not doing that which is wajib upon him. If you do what is wajib upon you, if you keep away from what Allah has made haram upon you, then you have reached Kamal al-Iman al-Wajib, the mandatory perfection of Iman. But then there's a higher level. There's even a higher level than the mandatory level of perfection of Iman. That is Kamal al-Iman al-Mustahab, the perfection of one's Iman which is mustahab, which is recommended. How do you get to that level? How do you get to the level of having that high level of Iman which is mustahab? If you get to that level, as the Messenger said, the highest level of your religion is ihsan. The highest level of your religion is ihsan. What is ihsan? That you worship Allah as though you see Him. Even though you don't see Him, He surely sees you. So concerning this, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah, he mentioned that when a person has that istihdar of Allah Ta'ala, he has that consciousness that Allah is watching me. When you've got that consciousness that Allah is watching me, Allah is seeing me, when you worship your Rabb as though you are right in front of Him, worshipping Him Jalla wa Ala, when you reach that level of your deen, of your religion, the highest level of ihsan, then you become too shy. You become too ashamed. You have haya in front of Allah. You become too shy and ashamed in front of Allah to go after those things that don't concern you. The hadith of good manners that we're looking at is that from the perfection of a person's Islam is that he leaves those things that don't concern him. Those things that you're not meant to have any inayah for. You're not meant to give importance to. The things that you are not meant to give importance to, number one, are the haram matters. That's number one. But then if you want to go to the highest level, then to reach the highest level, upon you is to be conscious that Allah Ta'ala is seeing you. He's watching you. He's well aware of what you are doing. For you to worship Allah, when you stand in front of Allah, worshipping Him, you stand in front of Him as though He's right before you, Jalla wa Ala. When you are at that, when you're in that state of mind, then you become too shy. You become too ashamed for Allah Ta'ala to see you doing those things that don't concern you, that you're not meant to give importance to. From the haram matters, from the doubtful matters, from the matters that are makruh, and then from the matters that are fudul, those matters that are excessive. So when a person reaches that level, his iman is at that level, that Allah is seeing me, He's watching me, He's acquainted with what I am doing, I worship Him as though I can see Him, then you become too shy from Allah, that He sees you pursuing those matters that are fudul, excessive. Excessive eating, for example. Excessive talking, for example. Excessive sleeping, for example. Excess in those matters that are mubah. If you do them, they are halal. They are permitted for you. They are permitted for you. But if you go into excess in that regard, then if your Islam is at that high level of ihsan, that high level of you being conscious that Allah is watching you, then you become too shy for Allah Jalla wa Ala to see you pursuing the fudul, the excessive permitted affairs of life. And this is a principle concerning good manners. That you leave what doesn't concern you. From leaving things that don't concern you, you will beautify your character. You'll beautify your character such that you become worthy of other people's companionship. Likewise, from what this hadith indicates, is the mafhum of this hadith. The implied meaning of this hadith. The hadith, the messenger says that from the perfection of a person's Islam, is that he leaves those things that don't concern him. That therefore means that from the perfection of your Islam is that you go after those things that concern you, that you pursue those things that concern you, that you give inayah, importance to those things that concern you. The wajibat. Now we reverse it and go in the same order. The first thing that concerns you are the wajibat. Your salah, your siyam, your fasting in Ramadan, your zakah if it's upon you, hajj if you're able to do so, birrul walidain, being good to your parents, being good to your neighbors. Those things that are wajib upon you, that is from the perfection of your Islam. And then after that, if you further want to perfect your Islam, then pursue those mustahabbat. Pursue those recommended deeds, those voluntary deeds. And then likewise after that, leave off those excessive matters of the dunya. So as Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, this hadith here, this third hadith, is one of those ahadith from which good manners arise from. Number one, the hadith of having a clean chest to your Muslim brothers. Number two, the hadith of controlling your tongue. Number three, this hadith of leaving those things that don't concern you. And the fourth and the final hadith is the hadith that has been recorded by Imam al-Bukhari in his Sahih from Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when the man came to the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam and he said, "Oh Sini, advise me." So the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam said, "La taghdab, do not become angry." فَرَدَّدَ مِرَارًا, the man kept on repeating the same question, "Advise me," and the Messenger gave him the same answer, "La taghdab, don't become angry." The deen of Islam, it guides to the best of morals, and it prohibits a person from the most despicable of morals and the most despicable of characteristics. Among them is al-ghadab, anger. Anger is not a good quality to have in general. Anger is a blameworthy quality to have. But what does the Prophet ﷺ mean when he said, "La taghdab, don't become angry"? Does he mean that becoming angry in and of itself is haram? No. Because that is something that is tabi'i. It's natural. Anger is a natural characteristic. It differs from one person to another. It may differ from one nation to another, one tribe to another. So the characteristic of anger, that's natural. What the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam is prohibiting against, as has been mentioned by the ulama, Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, he quotes from Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali and others, that a person keeps away from the asbab, the means, the avenues, the ways that will lead him to becoming angry. A person keeps away from the doorways that will lead him to becoming angry. A person keeps away from those ways and those means that will cause him to become angry. So the anger itself, that's not prohibited. But essentially acting upon the anger is prohibited. Putting yourself in a situation when you know that you can remove yourself from that situation and thus you become angry, that's prohibited. And among those ways that a person protects himself from falling prey, meaning becoming a victim to his anger, one of the things that saves you from acting upon your anger is number one. Before the situation ever arises, you need to develop a character, a good character, a character that has tu'adah, that has thoughtfulness, has deliberation. It thinks about the consequences of your actions. So before the situations even occur of you being faced with something that causes you anger, you need to have a history, you need to have a track record of being someone that has patience, being someone that has control, being someone that isn't led by his impulses. Otherwise, if you don't train yourself, then it's natural. If you're used to being an impulsive individual, then it is natural that when somebody says something he insults you, it's natural that you act upon it and then you react and then you do whatever angry people end up doing. So number one, you need to get yourself used to being a person that has a patient character, a non-impulsive character, a beautiful character like we've been talking about before. And then the second step is that when you're faced with that situation, that causes you to become angry, then you seek protection in Allah from the shaitan, because it is the shaitan that wants you to act upon your anger. From that which the Messenger ﷺ advised us to do when we become angry is that we sit down. And if the anger hasn't gone yet, then a person should lay down. This is the anger management program that has been found in the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. People at times, they go to the kuffar and they look for advice and seek advice from them concerning what type of methods and procedures can you advise with concerning anger management program, concerning anger management. But they never look at the anger management that has been advised by your Messenger ﷺ. إِذَا غَضِبَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَجْلِسْ. That the person, when he becomes angry, then let him sit down. If not, if the anger is still there, then let him lay down. Otherwise, if you don't follow the advice of the Messenger ﷺ, you don't, number one, have a program from beforehand of making your character a good, patient, non-hasty character. Likewise, when you're faced with a situation, you don't seek refuge in Allah from the shaitan. Likewise, when you're faced with a situation, you don't sit down and you don't lay down, then you've got no one to blame after that concerning what happens. What happens when you become angry and you act upon your anger is nothing but regret. That is why they say, Al-ghadab awwaluhu al-junun wa akhiruhu al-nadam. Anger, its initial stage is junun, is insanity, where the eye becomes red and the blood starts boiling and the heart starts racing. That's the first stage of anger. But then the end stage is what? Nadam, regret. So a person, he has to act upon these advice of the Messenger ﷺ concerning anger. Imam al-Bukhari, and we'll conclude with this. Imam al-Bukhari, he has in his Al-Adab al-Mufrad, the book that our Shaykh Abu Khadija Hafidhahullah Ta'ala was going through in Pakistan. He was going through it in England, and he was going through it in Pakistan as well when he was here. Fantastic book concerning developing good manners upon the methodology of the Messenger ﷺ. So in the Imam al-Bukhari, he has a book, he has a chapter, Bab at-Tu'adah fil Umur, the chapter of having tu'adah in your affairs, having deliberation and consideration concerning your affairs, thinking about the consequences of your actions. So in the Imam al-Bukhari, he brings a narration from Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Hasan al-Basri, he told us that there was a man, and this man had a slave, and he had a son. This man is on his deathbed, And so he tells his slave to take care of his son. I'm putting my son under your care because I'm going to die now. So the man said, I'll take care of your son. And that is what happened. Man passed away. The slave takes care of his former master's son, brings him up, nurtures him, takes care of him until he becomes a man, and then he gets him married. Now this young man, he's a young man now, this young married man whose father passed away, he was brought up by his father's former slave. This young man says, I want to go for talab al-ilm, I want to go for seeking knowledge. So get me ready. Gets him ready, he goes off to seek knowledge. He goes to another land to seek knowledge of his religion. He approaches the scholar there. The scholar says to him, before you go back to your homeland, when that point comes for you to go back to your homeland, then come to me, I'm going to teach you something. Come to me, I will teach you something. So then the point comes for the young man to go back to his homeland. He says to the scholar, I'm now about to depart home. So you wanted to teach me something. So the scholar says to him, 3 things. Ittaqillah, wasbir, wala tasta'jil. 3 things. This young man's not going to forget them, insha'Allah. Fear Allah. Be patient. And don't be hasty. Don't rush. Don't be hasty. 3 things, not easy to forget. Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, this contains all of goodness. These 3 things contain all of goodness. Ittaqillah, fear Allah. Wasbir, be patient. Wala tasta'jil, don't be hasty. The man goes back home. When he arrives home, he enters into his house. When he goes into his house, who does he see? His wife, sleeping in the room. But then he also sees someone else, an unidentifiable man, sleeping in the room, not too far from his wife, lying down, sleeping near his wife. Not next to her, away from her, but not too far from her. So this young man, he sees his wife and a stranger sleeping there. He says, I cannot have any patience with this. I can't wait for this. Goes back outside. He's about to take his weapon out to go and strike off the head of this intruder. And then what does he say? He remembers the advice of the alim. Ittaqillah. Have taqwa of Allah. Wasbir, be patient, wala tasta'jil. Don't be hasty, don't rush. So he puts the sword back, he goes into the house, stands in front of the head of that intruder, and he says, what am I waiting for? I can't be waiting for anything. Goes back outside, takes out his sword, but then he remembers the advice of the alim. Ittaqillah, fear Allah, wasbir, be patient, wala tasta'jil, don't rush. Puts the sword back in, goes back into the house, stands at the head of this man who he can't identify. When he stands at his head, the man gets up, looks at the young man, and he's smiling, he's happy, hugs the young man, kisses the young man, and then he says, ماذا أصبت بعدي? What did you achieve after me? Who is this intruder? Who is this man? This man is the slave, the former slave. And that woman is from his maharim, his daughter or his niece. The young boy grew up and he got the young boy married to his daughter or to his niece, somebody that is mahram to. So he said to the man, he said to the young man, ماذا أصبت بعدي? What did you achieve after me? You've been gone for a long time, seeking ilm of the deen, sitting with the ulama. What did you achieve after me? So the young man said, أصبت بعدك خيرا كثيرا والله أصبت بعدك خيرا كثيرا. I swear by Allah, I achieved a lot of good after you. After I left you and I went to learn the deen, I got a lot of good. What happened, what I achieved, is that I walked between my sword and your head 3 times. But the knowledge that I got, وَلَكِنَ الْعِلْمِ الَّذِي أَصَبْتُ حَجَزَنِي عَنْ قَتْلِكَ. But the knowledge that I got, that prevented me from killing you today. The knowledge that I received, the tarbiyah that I got from the ulama, it prevented me from killing you today. This is the thamara. This is the fruit. This is the result of tu'ada. Not being hasty, not rushing, having deliberation, being thoughtful, thinking about the consequences of your actions. That is a great and a massive reminder for myself and for others concerning restraining ourselves, not being led by our impulses. If we are not led by our impulses, then on the most part we will never have to suffer regret, and we can then enjoy the companionship of others. Others then, they can give us their time, they can give us their friendship, they can give us their companionship, because we are not impulsive people. Impulsive people harm those that are around them. So those are the 4 pillars of good characteristics. Number 1, salamatul sadr, clean chest for your Muslim brothers. Number 2, controlling your tongue. Number 3, leaving those things that you're not meant to be concerned about. And number 4, not being led by your impulses. نكتفي بهذا والله تعالى أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.
सवाल पूछ रहे थे अमजद भाई, सवाल पूछ रहे हैं, अहम सवाल है। कौन पूछ रहा है? अमजद भाई पूछ रहे थे। औलिया किराम जो होते हैं, औलिया किराम अल्लाह ताला के जो वली हैं, उनके बारे में अहले सुन्नत वल जमा का जो अकीदा है, उनकी करामात के ताल्लुक से, उनके जो कश्फ होते हैं, उस ताल्लुक से क्या अकीदा होना चाहिए? मुख्तसर बयान।
So the question is, and I would prefer that our Ustadh Tariq would be answering the answer to this. He's better qualified. But anyhow, the question is that the people of Tasawwuf, the people of Sufism, if I've understood the question correctly, they elevate the station and the status of wilaya, of allegiance to Allah, and being from the awliya of Allah, being from the allies of Allah. They elevate that status, number 1, to such an extent that they end up associating them with Allah in worship. Secondly, they have the incorrect criteria concerning who the allies of Allah Ta'ala are, who the awliya of Allah Ta'ala are. And so, for them the criteria is karamat, is miracles, is things that are extraordinary, things that are khariqul aada, those things that are out of the norms. For example, flying in the air, walking upon water, walking upon hot coals, getting a dagger or even a spear and inserting it into their bodies, and so on and so forth. These things are khariqul aada. These things they go outside of the norm. They're extraordinary. So if somebody achieves an extraordinary feat, then the people of Tasawwuf, the people of Sufism, they say that this person, he must be from the awliya of Allah. He must be from the allies of Allah. He must be someone that has the allegiance of Allah, the friendship of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Why? Because the criteria to determine the awliya of Allah is karamat, is things that are extraordinary, like walking upon hot coals, flying in the air, walking upon the sea and things like that. However, as we've discussed previously, that our marji', our reference point concerning our aqeedah, concerning our beliefs, is revelation. Beliefs are something that cannot be established in their details except through revelation. You don't know about what is to happen in the afterlife as a human being, unless the creator of the human being informs you via his messengers. There are certain basic things concerning life that a person, he can ascertain via basic observation of the universe, right? Concerning the existence of Allah, concerning the lordship of Allah, concerning that the one who created this, he deserves thanks and gratitude from me. But then the tafsilat and the details of the beliefs, it's not possible for the human being to know them unless it's from Allah Jalla wa Ala, and the only medium via which Allah Ta'ala informs mankind concerning beliefs is via the medium of the prophets. And therefore, the only marji', the only reference point as far as your aqidah is concerned is the Quran, because that's revelation, and the Sunnah, because that's revelation as well. Not just that, but then it is qualified. It is qualified with the understanding of the Salaf. That verse that you take from the Quran, that hadith that you take from the Sunnah of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, how do you understand it? Upon the understanding of the early virtuous generations of Al-Islam. So does Allah Jalla wa Ala provide us with a criteria concerning the awliya of Allah? So we have the criteria of the Sufis, which is karamat, and lights. They talk about black lights and blue lights and red lights, and the higher that you go in your wilayah to Allah, then the higher grading of lights you get. And you keep on getting to that high level until you get to a state of kashf, where Allah Jalla wa Ala, as they claim, unveils Himself to you. So that is their criteria. Tell me where from the book of Allah that criteria is found? Not to be found. Tell me where from the Sunnah of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam that criteria of miracles is to be found? Not to be found. Tell me where from the companions and the tabi'een and their successors and the imams of guidance that came after them, tell me where the criteria of miracles, of karamat is to be found? It's not to be found. So what is found in the book of Allah concerning the criteria of the awliya of Allah? Allah Jalla wa Ala, He said, Allā inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun alladhina amanu wa kanu yattaqun. There it is. Very simple. The book of Allah, the guidance that Allah Jalla wa Ala has provided in the book, simple, easy to understand. As Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, he said concerning these matters, the principles of our deen, يَفْهَمُهَا أَبْلَدُ الْبَلِيدِ, that the most thickest of people can understand the usul of the deen when he reads the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. You don't need a high IQ to understand the book of Allah. What you need is ikhlas. What you need is sincerity. And so here Allah Jalla wa Ala gives us a very simple criteria concerning the awliya of Allah. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Those who have iman and they have taqwa. What is iman? Iman, it is belief in the heart, statement upon the tongue, actions upon the limbs. That which you believe in your heart is part of your iman. That which you believe in your heart is the correct aqidah. So as soon as you bring me somebody who you claim to be from the awliya of Allah, yet this person, he says that Allah is mixed within His creation, then I know he is not from the awliya of Allah at all. Because Allah Ta'ala, He said, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, the awliya of Allah are those who have correct iman. Part and parcel of having correct iman is having the correct aqidah, having the correct belief. The aqidah of Imam Bukhari, for example, your aqidah should match that aqidah. Imam Bukhari, his aqidah is that Allah Ta'ala is above the throne. So if you come along and you say that your wali, this wali of Allah, this Pir Sahib, that he says that Allah is mixed within the creation, wahdatul wujud, that Allah is incarnate within the creation, as soon as you say that, I know he's not from the awliya of Allah. using the Quran and the Sunnah as my criteria. If it's the case that you are all going for salah, to pray salah, everybody gets up, they go to the masjid to pray salah. But then Pir Sahib is sitting down and he says, the pen has been lifted upon me. I don't need to pray. I am not mukallaf anymore. I don't need to do righteous actions. I don't need to do those things that show that I fear Allah. As soon as your Pir Sahib says that, then you know that he can't be from the awliya of Allah, because the second criteria that Allah mentioned, لَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ, the awliya of Allah, they have taqwa, they have fear of Allah, they're scared of Allah, so they act upon the commands of Allah and they keep away from the prohibitions. Who are the awliya of Allah? Two things. They have correct iman, part and parcel of that is having the correct aqidah. And number two, they are people of taqwa. They are people who abstain from what Allah has made haram, and they do what Allah Ta'ala has commanded them to do. I'm not too sure how much that helps, but if not, Ustadh Tariq is here. He can give a supplementation to that, inshallah ta'ala. Tamam? Allah Ta'ala alam, sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.